Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Combat Chats podcast. We're going to be going over the previous UFC Fight Night card. It was a good main card.
Yeah, it was a good main card.
It was a difference of what we normally see. We often see a lot of wrestling or a lot of striking on these UFC cards, but I feel like we saw a lot of grappling, a lot of jiu-jitsu, which is really good to see. And a lot of very exciting jiu-jitsu as well. A lot of it was very back and forth. There were a few fights which were, I'd say, dominant, but for the
Yeah.
most part, they were generally quite contentious, and it's really good to see as well the high level of jiu-jitsu. Starting us off in, if you will.
Yeah, so the first fight on the card uh was the Europe Medic fight. He got an opponent switch last minute, which is never great to see. And Orabi, how do I say that?
Arabi.
Arabi. His grappling looked dominant, straight from the off. Medic was getting ready for a stand-up war, and probably going to fight a really technical, rangy fight. And he started the round well, but as soon as Arabi got his hands on him, it seemed like a wrap.
Well, that's the thing. Medic looked very good to start off with, and he looked like he was going to cause some serious damage and potentially maybe finish him. I know he landed a few big shots, and he was very much on it. And like you said about the range as well, he was definitely looking to maintain his range. But the moment he hurt Arabi, or the moment Arabi looked like he was hurt, Arabi shoots, you kind of have to in that
Yeah.
situation. And I know on paper, you look at him, I believe he's not necessarily grappling isn't necessarily his most favorable trait, although
Mm.
it's very, very high level. You cannot doubt that at all. He did what he had to do. He wrestled him, and I think that the defense of Medic was definitely shown to be not what it needs to be. In all fairness, Arabi did very much ragdoll him,
Yeah.
and there was very little you could do. And it's a very, very tough opponent, and it's a shame really because the opponent he was going to fight beforehand, it would have been a stand-up fight.
Yeah. And in my opinion, Parsons and Medic would have put on a very entertaining stand-up fight. Could have been up there for one of the fights of the night. So it was a bit annoying to get it scrapped last minute, but we've got someone who's 12-1 in their professional career and looked very dominant against. Let's be real, Medic is actually a very good fighter. Like I see him as kind of a prospect. So to come in and dominate. And he got hurt early on, and straight away he went to the grappling, and it working so well that early. He kind of didn't look to take his foot off it. Like he just carried on grappling the whole fight, and Medic couldn't get any rhythm going on the feet. He was doing well to stand up back to his feet, but at the end the submission came.
And that's the thing. Arabi, he was so on top of him. Medic couldn't do anything at all,
Mm,
really. And his jiu-jitsu is very clearly something which he really needs to work on because the defense was very minimal. There's not a lot you can do in that situation, but he wasn't very active on the ground at all.
no.
It looked like he wasn't comfortable there because you're not going to be comfortable in a position like that, and very much you are at risk of that sub, which did occur in the second round, but it's just something which he needs to really work on. Really impressive performance from Arabi though, for that to be your debut
Yeah, only
and to
on a
be able
few
to
days'
do
notice.
that on
So
a 4 days notice as well.
yeah.
And he said that he wants to fight as soon as possible as
Mm.
well afterwards in the interview. So that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, that's what you want to see from these guys when they come in and get such an impressive win like that. Like Shamaev kind of set the blueprint. He literally fought the weekend after his first win, so that's how you build hype. You got to fight often. So yeah, hopefully he fights again soon. Very impressed with his performance. Next up on the card, Amanda Ribas against Pinero. It was actually a very good fight to be fair. Ribas struggled a lot in the first round with the kind of side to side movement and the power of Pinero, but she found her range in that second round.
I think with the second round, it was all about the implementation of his leg kicks.
Mm,
That's really what it was because the moment you start throwing leg kicks, the moment you start to be able to find your range. Something I said last week was that with Pinero, she's very much a counter striker. She will throw it offensively, but she's often on the back foot and she's
yeah,
throwing these big strikes. If you look at what she was throwing, there were a few jabs in there, but for the most part, there were lots of overhands
mm,
and a few, I'd say, haymakers
yeah,
as well, which now looking at Rivas, her movement, the way she was moving her footwork, it was very hard to land anything like a jab because you don't really have an opening there. And it was also looking at her going towards uh,
Pinero.
Pinero, her movement when being pressured by Ribas, the way she was moving side to side, it was very hard to have a clear target. that's when those leg kicks come in. When
Yeah.
you start finding that range, and when you're able to throw from a bit more range, and that's really what it did because after the first round, Rebounds was looking pretty beaten up.
Yeah, I mean, Rebus going into that second round kind of bumps and bruises and cuts all over her face, and that just shows Panera's, she really put it on her in that first round. And it's a great point you make where Rebus kind of stopped the punching range where she would strike with kicks first and then end her combination with punches. Where in the first round, we kind of saw her notorious head movement being tested, and she was kind of running in with her hands down, eating shots. I remember on the night I compared it to Mackenzie Dern, but obviously not nowhere near that bad. But it's kind of same similarities the way they rush in, and it's so easy to slip off and catch them with them overhands. But the kicks implemented in the second round really saved her from maybe a bad beating in that one because as soon as she started ending those kick combinations with her punches, it looked like a whole different fight. And Panera started gassing out, and Rebus really turned it on. And just, a highlight reel finish with the spinning wheel kick.
Oh, definitely. So with Pinero looked, in my opinion, very good in the
Yeah,
first round, and
she did.
in all fairness, I think she looked consistently good in the second round as well. I don't think she was being inactive because what she was doing, although she looked like she was backing away, because it was very much a Rebus pressing forward continuously throughout the fight. Although she wasn't always backing away, she wasn't being inactive. She was looking for that timing,
Mm,
and all it would have really taken is for one or two of those big shots to land to potentially put Rebus out. Rebus did like that spinning wheel kick,
yeah,
and that spinning wheel kick really does just show how she found her range.
mm,
The,
definitely.
because without implemented leg kicks, without doing what she was doing, she was potentially getting finished.
Yeah,
And
maybe.
I could see it happening because she wasn't getting caught too much, but she was getting beaten in periods. And all it would have taken is one or two of those shots to land, and they were being thrown frequently enough for them to land. All it would have taken is for one or two of those to land, and then Rivas would have been in a lot of trouble. But yeah, beautiful spinning wheel kick. Did you expect that? Like,
I mean, Rebus has shown before she's got like a high array of different finishes that she can go to. She's always a fighter that even if she's getting beaten up in the fight, is always looking for that finish. So obviously you're very surprised when you see a kick like that come out. But she's finished so many different women, and she's a real sort of power puncher and uses her kicks more than anything. So it's not too surprising, is it?
didn't see too many head kicks though
No,
beforehand.
no, there's a lot of body kicks and leg kicks, but that always sets up the head one in the end, doesn't it?
What a way to finish off a fight.
Yeah, yeah, and just wobbled her with it. Panera did all right to kind of eat it, but fell shortly after.
I feel like you could definitely tell it hurts, and like, a
Yeah,
lot of the time, if
definitely.
they stand, but you see how they take it, just looking at their face, looking at their head, their equilibrium. Not
Mm,
every big shot is going to drop you,
yeah,
and we see that a lot.
and it's lucky it hit with the kind of foot and bottom of the foot instead of the heel, isn't it? Because if that heel kind of wrapped around the ear, we've seen what happens with that when that happens.
I definitely say it happens like so much,
Mm,
almost once a month, if not more.
yeah. Yeah, it does seem there's a lot more of these sort of stunning knockouts coming at the moment.
And I'm not just talking about with kicks as well, strikes as well,
Yeah,
hooks, and but I feel like kicks like that don't
yeah,
happen
not
all the
once a
time.
month.
I realised what I just said then,
Yeah,
but yeah, no, like we saw that that left hook on what was it, the card recently,
yeah, the Pereira guy
Pereira,
who just
yeah,
attempted
we
with
just
that.
clipped it.
Yeah. Next fight, Peyton Talbot against Nick Aguirre.
Aguero, I'd say.
Yeah, Aguilera. Peyton Talbot really getting tested early on in this one with kind of being taken down. Spent most of the fight on the bottom. But I feel like when you're young and you kind of have that will where you don't actually think you can be beaten because he's 7-0. Yeah, he was kind of staying in the fight, and it seemed like that finish was going to come at the end of the first round, and yeah, end of the second round. Sorry, but he got it in round three in the end. What do you think about his performance?
So it's an interesting one. Stylistically, for him, this is a very difficult matchup.
Mm,
To think where he's came from, I believe he's a champion in his former division. To where he's came from, to because we've seen in the past, his grappling has always been a vulnerability of his.
mm,
He's always been very much a fast striker in your face, very heavy from the get go. When we've seen him on the ground, he's done well to survive, but we've not seen him be too offensive with his submissions. We've not seen him be too offensive with grappling. Nick Aguirre, he's not somebody which I'd say is necessarily. Once you look at him and you think pure wrestler,
No.
pure grappler, but it was definitely clear to see that he knew that was a vulnerability and he shot, I think, within the first 30 seconds, or
Yeah.
maybe it was the first thing he did.
And he spent most of the time on top as well, to be fair.
And that's the thing, and you have to kind of do that against opponents. I mean, both are. I think Peyton's what 7-0, and we would have been 7-1 at the time.
Mm,
Peyton would have been 6-0. You have to do what you have to do to win the fights,
yeah.
and it's in all fairness, it's not super exciting to watch. This the fight probably was one of the worst ones on the main card,
Yeah, I agree.
but at the end of the day, he did what he had to do,
Mm,
and it was overall, it was a really impressive comeback from Payne. I didn't anticipate that to happen at all. He kind of just reversed it really, which
yeah.
is and what was it, rear naked?
Yeah, it was in
It's
the end.
really really nice as well, and it was kind of just jumped on it. So
Just
good
took the
win.
opportunity, didn't he? Just snapped on it.
It would be really nice for the UFC to put him against somebody who is probably a bit more stylistically suited to him. I know
Yeah.
you can't pick and choose your fights, but I think that this isn't really a display of what he can do with his striking
Mm,
because he hasn't had the opportunity to.
yeah. I mean, we saw his fighting contender, and he's just a fun, sort of all out war sort of guy. So you definitely put on some more exciting fights with him. Getting on to the next fight. In my opinion, this was the standout of the card, the most impressive thing that happened on the card. Chase Hooper really seems like he's growing into his body in this weight division now, moving up to lightweight, undefeated since he's gone there, and everything just seems a bit more powerful with him. The way he's transitioning into different positions and the strength he's using. Before he used just technique, and you could kind of big brother him around a little bit, but now, Jordan Levitt's a strong dude, and he was managing to reverse pretty much any time he got on taken down. He stuffed multiple takedowns, and the grappling display was just it's so entertaining watching Chase Hooper fight.
Yeah, so this was really interesting. We saw him in his last fight. He had like this brand new style of almost in your face,
Yeah.
take you down and grapple, submit, very, very offensive. And it was really good to see it because with Jordan Levitt, I feel like these are the opponents in which he struggles against. The
Mm.
opponents are on him. Jordan Levitt, he loves to throw his kicks. He loves to keep the range. And I think he started off by kind of, we didn't see any, I don't think he threw any kicks, that as far
No,
as I'm
Chase
aware.
Hooper just rushed him and he shot for a takedown.
I think they both kind of rushed, didn't they? Because I know that
Mm.
Jordan Levitt, I think he threw like a right and
Yeah.
then he shot for takedown. And what's impressive about Chase Hooper is not only for a start is he super young
Mm.
for a UFC fighter to be in the UFC at 24 years of age and to be doing what he's doing, but he's very young to be a black belt as well.
Yeah.
To be a black belt at 24 years of age, and this is very clearly not a black belt he's received because he's
But
gone to a certain school
yeah,
which
definitely.
awards him very easily. He is very high level. When we look at these best jiu-jitsu fighters, they don't just use the arm knocks and they don't just transition from these. What we don't normally see the kind of grappling we see from wrestlers.
Mm.
We see stuff like the use of knee bars and
Yeah, like going
grabbing
for
the
the legs a
feet
lot
and
more, yeah.
using your legs as well.
Mm.
And we saw that elsewhere in the card as well. But looking at how high level he is at jiu-jitsu, I think he's going to cause some real issues.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's before, he was kind of made a joke, not a joke out of, but you saw people poking fun on the internet, and he was just a kid who I think kind of found himself in this situation where all of a sudden he's an MMA fighter after being just a jiu-jitsu kid for so long, and he's fighting these beast knockout artists. And let's be real, he showed so much toughness early on, and now the skills to be able to get it to the ground are coming, even the skills on the feet. It kind of worries me how much he leaves his chin in the air, but that's all going to come with the more experience he gets. And let's be real, he's fighting more dangerous guys. That sort of helps keep your mind right in a fight when you're fighting someone that can take your lights out. And let's be real, going forward, he's going to be fighting them guys now because Paddy Pimblett just got a win over John Levitt. Recently, not his last fight, the fight before, and he's being kind of catapulted into the sort of Jared Gordon levels, and we saw Jared Gordon get a massive knockout a couple of weeks ago. So these are the sort of fighters he's going to be moving up and fighting now.
And this is a very competitive level at lightweight. This
Yeah,
bracket of, like you said, the Jared Gordons, like you said, the Paddy Pimbletts, the Nico,
Tony Ferguson's.
Tony Ferguson's. Well,
Yeah.
oh, that's
But like,
upsetting.
let's be real, Tony Ferguson fighting like it was only 3, 4 years ago where Tony Ferguson was at a level where we could say he might beat Khabib, and now like he's at a level where Chase Hooper could bag a fight against a sort of Tony Ferguson level fighter.
Oh, he could. I think that'd be. I think that's probably a better fight than the Paddy Pimblett one. If I'm honest with
Safer,
you.
isn't it? Just give Tony a nice little.
Well, yeah, with Tony Ferguson, it is unfortunate what's happened to him. But regardless, we have spoken about him a few times. He's It is what it is. That's another fight to talk
Yeah,
about another time.
we will be soon. I think he's fighting Paddy this year still, isn't he?
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think it is at the end of the year.
yeah,
It is.
so
I think
that's coming up.
is that the big one.
Yeah, that's in my opinion card of the year.
Yeah,
That's for me.
something to look forward to. But Chase Hooper's performance, you can't deny how impressive he is looking at the moment, and he's on a tear. And I feel like we did speak about Mackenzie Dern because I think that they're similar to an extent.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
My only hope is that when Chase Hooper does fight opponents who are able to deal with it better, who are able to counter it better, he is able to switch it up.
Hmm.
Because if you're continuing to try that, and if you're doing that over and over again, I mean, in fairness, his striking isn't bad.
No.
His striking in the
Well,
past few fights have
yeah, it's
looked
a little
so
bit
much
better.
better.
Yeah, it has.
It's not super high level striking, but it is improved by mountains and leaps, and it's really interesting to see where he goes because he's going to be causing some issues. And I mean, what do you reckon his next fight is?
It's an interesting one because the for me it just seems weird thinking of Chase Hooper and him maybe entering the top 15, which you can't disrespect him like that because he's getting to that sort of level. But I think maybe even a fight like Gerald Gordon next. I get Gerald Gordon's coming off a good win. Gordon might actually still be ranked. I wish I. Do you have the rankings in front of you? I don't have them, but it's kind of be people just outside that top 15 level. So it would be hard to think off the top of my head. I think him, Gerald Gordon's a good fight. Gordon's a big step up though.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, Jared is dangerous as well,
Mm,
and it's all a matter of what happens on the ground.
yeah,
But looking at Jared on the feet, it's a very tough opponent
yeah.
to try and walk towards like that.
But he's fought as dangerous guys as Jared Gordon on the feet probably, and he's like it's not like Jared Gordon's a. I know he has got knockouts, but it's not like there's always a threat like of that knockout happening. So maybe that is a sort of way you can kind of try and push Chase Hooper forward a bit, give him a match up against a respected person who probably isn't going to take his lights off with one punch if he gets the opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think that does sound like a sensible call. Really, I
Mm,
think anyone within that. So I don't believe
yeah,
he's top 15. I believe he might be
just
outside the
outside,
ranking.
yeah.
There are a lot of fighters who are just outside that ranking. But I think something like that would be a really
Terrence
good
McKinney,
test.
that'd be a fun
That'd be
one.
interesting. That would actually be really
McKinney would
interesting.
probably take his head off, but
Do you reckon so?
I think he's a bit too explosive and quick. But you got to give these guys a bit of a match up at some point, especially with McKinney. You
Yeah,
know, you, although he did take a few losses, you got to start giving him some challenging fights again soon, aren't you? So
definitely so.
yeah, there's just so much you can do with Chase Hooper. I still think maybe they should wait on him a little bit. He's still so unpolished in MMA, if we're honest.
And that's the thing, they have the potential to make potentially a top five fighter, if not
Yeah,
higher, but
yeah.
because of how he's looking. He's only 24 years of age.
Mm.
The top 15 is, there aren't many which are going to be below the age of like what? I think Tarukian is he the youngest one?
Yeah, he's got to be around the same age, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, he's like 26, 25,
Mm.
I think.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. There aren't many UFC fighters who are that young who have that much potential. So
Mm.
it would be really good to see them try and just nurture a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe potentially give them some more fights like this. Although saying that leave it is not an easy fight.
No.
That's a big step up.
Yeah, John Lever. That's the first win Paddy got where I actually was like, fair play. That's a good win. So we can't just change the boundaries because he's lost a couple. He's also got some very good wins in the UFC too. And getting into co-main event now, in my opinion, kind of a bit of a letdown if I speak the truth because I feel like Morales could be such an exciting knockout artist by the reaction he gets when he does hit people is such a big reaction. He just looks like he hits so hard. But he kind of loves to go out there and just technical box. It wasn't a bad fight, I'm not saying that, but I feel like he could have kind of put it on Jake Matthews a bit more.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think that there were periods of time in which, because the fight overall was actually very contentious,
Yeah.
and when Jake was landing, he was landing. I'd say he was a bit more pace with it
Hmm.
because you look at Moraes. I feel like when he was going towards Jake and when he was fighting in the pocket, he was landing some nasty shots.
Hmm.
But something which she said to me outside of this was the killer instincts.
Yeah.
And you can tell that killer instinct isn't there because there are times in which he could definitely cause some serious damage to Matthews. I think with this fight, like you said, I don't know if I'd call it a letdown, but there was
Yeah.
just so much more from it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a bad fight at all. It was not a bad fight at all. There is, however, more we could have seen from it. And something I would have liked to see from Jake Matthews is I know that he's very much he likes his boxing. He
Mm.
really likes his boxing, but he's also a jiu-jitsu black belt.
Yeah. I mean,
He
he's got a lot of subs on his records too. I'm pretty sure.
a lot of subs and he's subbed black belts as well
Yeah.
early on in his career. He's not too old himself. So to maybe see him try and use his jiu-jitsu, I think that would have been very, very beneficial to him as somebody like Morales who is very much more a striker.
Yeah.
So overall, I do understand what you mean. It's a good fight though.
Yeah. It was.
We just would like to see more because if Morales had dog in him,
Mm.
he could have potentially put him out.
Yeah.
Although saying like Jake is also very dangerous as well, and there were times in which Jake was countering, that could have also resulted in something vice versa. So
Yeah, I mean, Jake was landing some really nice sort of slip overhands and slip straight rights, but I feel like the power difference was just so evident. Morella's just pumping the jab and the rear uppercut the whole time. That was kind of the two main punches he went to. The check hook as well was really good. If you look at him as a technical fighter, I can see why everyone rates him as such a high prospect, but for me, I just need to see a little bit more. I'm not hating on the guy, but that's just my opinion.
something I do feel like he did have in this fight as well over Jay Matthews was the use of leg kicks.
Yeah, yeah,
Something
true.
which because with Jake I feel like he's quite basic with his boxing. His boxing's very good. He's really worked on his boxing throughout his career
Mm,
and he's gotten a very high level of boxing because of it. However, he doesn't put those kicks in. And that's what Morales was able to do well. That's how he was getting in close. He was able to just manage it enough just to get in because a kick to the leg, that's going to throw you off a little bit. That's going
yeah,
to throw the tempo of the
breaks the
fight.
rhythm, doesn't it?
It does break the rhythm. And that's the trouble with Matthews with boxing. Like you said, there are these slips, there are these overhands. But for the most part, when this rhythm is very much the same, you can't really do much when the rhythm's not being broken.
Yeah. Getting on to the last fight on the card, Brendan Allen just showing how good he is yet again. I think this is his sixth win in a row now. I think five rear naked chokes in there as well. This guy is a beast, and I think we both pretty much called this quite well last week.
I think I got it exactly right on verdict.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we use verdict, and it sort of puts us all in a league, and you are smashing it right now. I bet you're really happy with how that's going.
Honestly, I'm surprised. I didn't actually get to catch this card live, unfortunately, which is frustrating. But
Working.
to see that I had all picks correct.
Yeah, yeah. I got all picks but one. I'm pretty sure. I can't remember which the one I got wrong.
Okay, would it have been like the Medic one maybe?
Yeah, yeah. I think I did
Yeah,
pick
because that
Medic
was the that was the
last
last
minute.
minute.
Yeah, on verdict, it made a switch up last minute, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know who the other guy was. So I picked Medic on that one. But Brendan Allen showing just how strong he is in every sort of position, doing really well on the feet and having no problem just sitting in Paul Craig's guard all day. And there was maybe one big sort of threat with the calf slicer at the start. I'm sure you're going to want to talk more about that because how high level jiu-jitsu that was, but overall just a dominant performance by Allen.
Brendan Allen, what Brendan Allen had over Paul Craig, I think on the feet, and it could have just been this fight potentially because his last fight, Paul Craig looked so good on the feet.
Yeah, it
He
was a
he
lot
he,
better.
he looked like very much a complete martial artist in this fight on the feet. I think he had a hard time against Brendan Allen. I think when Brendan Allen was on the feet, he was able to set up a lot more. And I know he caused some serious damage with the right,
Yeah, big
straight
right
right,
hand in the,
big
I
right
think,
hand.
third or second round.
Third and second round. These are all things. You could say maybe I do. Paul Craig was definitely hurt.
Yeah.
He wobbled.
The way he shot in straight away after.
Maybe that was tactical. Maybe that was like
Nah, but I think
nah.
that's just
He
your
looked hurt. He
yeah,
looked
that's your
hurt.
brain going, oh, I need to get out of this situation.
Yeah, and that's the thing. On the ground, Paul Craig. Some of his transmissions were you. I when you watch something like that and you don't do jiu-jitsu or you don't know a lot about jiu-jitsu, you often think to yourself like, how is that even possible?
Yeah,
And Paul Craig is one of those fighters on the ground, which when he does something, you're thinking to yourself, how does that
yeah,
happen?
yeah.
if you look at a lot of his fights, something I always think about Paul Craig, and this is because I don't know a lot about jiu-jitsu as far as how jiu-jitsu works necessarily, is that he looks like he's losing before
all
he
the
wins,
time, yeah.
but he doesn't.
Mm,
And that's the thing, he does not look like he's losing. He has what the most arm triangles in
yeah,
UFC,
triangle chokes in
triangle
UFC, yeah.
chokes, triangle chokes in UFC, and what with four?
Yeah, I think he's got four. And that is, I saw the other day, is a shocking amount of triangles that actually has been in UFC. It's not many at all. I think it's around like 60 or something like that in the whole time the UFC's been around.
What do you think that is?
I think maybe they used to happen a lot more back in the day, and how often do we see them now? Like, I swear Paul Craig's the only guy who gets them really these days because I feel like everyone's just at a level where you're not kind of jumping into a triangle from anyone. It's not an easy submission to set up. You got to sit around and let them kind of set it up on you, haven't you?
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's not something which you just allow to happen. I think an arm triangle is very complex to try and set up, like you said, and it's not something you just let happen.
Hmm.
It's something which you're tied up, you're not able to do anything about
Yeah.
it.
And we see Paul Craig, he sets it up in such unique, different ways. The one he got Jamal Hill with, where he kind of slipped, and God, the 205er, the Ukrainian dude, I can't remember his name. But he got on both with kind of slipped a punch from the bottom and slapped up the triangle. Krylov, that's the name.
Yeah, yeah.
Nikita Krylov slips a punch and slaps up a triangle from both, and you don't see anyone with the skill level to do that. So that's probably why they're so rare.
That's the thing. I think another thing as well, a lot of the time, if the opponent's strong enough, there is always that possibility to get
Yeah,
slammed.
yeah,
And
definitely.
we don't see it too often, but when we do see it, it's pretty brutal. If you
Yeah.
get slammed on your back, you're winded.
Mm,
Get slammed on your neck, you're potentially out.
mm,
So it's not something we see too often. Brendan Allen, I feel like I didn't quite rate him enough, or I feel like he's going to be rated more though.
yeah. I feel like he's close to a title shot. I actually feel like he is. He's got 6 wins in a row. He's got some wins over some real good people now. And probably, I think he called for a number one contenders fight, and that's probably what you got to give him now. Maybe him against Cannonier, him against Vittori, someone like that. Probably not Vittori, but him Cannonier is a good fight.
Oh yeah, definitely. So
Mm.
Cannonier would be interesting as well. Do you think that'd be a good fight? Do you think that'd go?
Yeah, I think Allen's really good. Like Cannonier looks so good in his last fight against Vittori, though. I don't know how he's improving so much at like 40 years of age in that short amount of time, but yeah, he did look super impressive. And
Sometimes it's just in you, isn't it?
yeah, I do think that's a great fight, and I think that's probably the direction they'll go with it.
Yeah. With this Paul Craig, I thought Paul Craig didn't look too bad in the fight.
Hmm.
I thought that the jiu-jitsu in this fight, this is the kind of fight you watch where know this is high level jiu-jitsu,
Yeah,
and you can't really discredit Paul Craig at all because he was doing bits on the ground. Because I think looking at the was it the control time for
yeah.
round one and round two, up until Brendan was very much on him. It was dead on the exact same,
Hmm.
and that really does just show how competitive it is. And it was really good to see this get to the ground. I feel like it was always going to go to the ground
Yeah,
with Paul Craig. 9 times out of 10, it does. But the way this fought out, it was almost like a jiu-jitsu match, really.
yeah,
It was like watching jiu-jitsu, and it really does show that how good the good jiu-jitsu fighters are
hmm.
in the UFC are.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that jiu-jitsu, but one of the biggest factors were in the fight the brutal ground and pound at times from Brendan Allen as well. So he knew when to kind of differentiate between the two, and he sliced Paul Craig open early and just continued damaging on that cut, and kind of broke Paul Craig down slowly, didn't he? And wasn't fun to watch as a big Paul Craig fan, but Brendan Allen's just showing he's reaching that next level now. So overall, super impressed with Brendan Allen. I hope he gets a big fight next. There is a few other things. Obviously, there's no card for us to break down. We're going to do that next week. There's a few other things I want to touch on just a little bit, and I saw it being touched on Michael Bisping's podcast, and that's just the fact that a lot of these champions are kind of looking straight away to jump up a weight class. We've seen Islam Makhachev call for it. We've seen Volkanovski, probably the guy who did deserve it, but he jumped up back to back and fought twice. One was on short notice. Now Leon Edwards as well, trying to get a fight with the winner of Strickland and Duplessis. So it's just, in my opinion, it's a frustrating thing, and I just want to sort of bring to you some different ways we can look at sort of making sure it doesn't happen so much. I want to get your opinions on this. I think, in my opinion, this is what I've kind of thought as my first idea came to my head. I think five title defenses before you can move up and fight for another belt. I don't know if you think there should be a rule set or kind of just you clear out your division, or because in my opinion you should have to beat all the legit contenders before you look to move up, and that should be a thing made for someone who's good enough to make that history. You know?
So I do understand where you're coming from. I think with 5 fights, a lot of the time people become double champs. A lot of the time, it's all we look at how quickly they do it,
Hmm.
and that's kind of like a benchmark for success. For example, Pereira did it in however many months or years, and then Conor took a little bit longer. But at the same time, Conor, you can't ever not get
Yeah.
it. That's iconic. So I do understand where you're coming from with the five. I think the 5 fights. Let's say, for example, you're going to fight an average of every 3 months.
Hmm.
That's a year and a quarter, which to be fair isn't unreasonable to wait a
No.
year and a half at all. That's not unreasonable at all. However, I feel like sometimes these fighters do need to move up, especially in these divisions where the fighters are very much as only 2 or 3 contenders, really. We don't see that very often,
Hmm.
but we have seen that in the past. Divisions such as maybe, I don't want to say lightweight because I don't feel like that's completely accurate, but your featherweights.
I feel like you can't say that about any men's division in the
No,
UFC.
you
Maybe
can't. Not
heavyweights.
anymore. Anyway, maybe a
Uh,
couple of years back.
yeah, yeah, a
Definitely
few
a
years
couple of years
back.
back. A few years back.
Flyweights, definitely flyweights a couple of years ago. But now even like look at every. I don't want to make this a male female thing, but look at every male UFC weight class. The top 10 is stacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and any one of them on a good day can go and fight for a championship. So for me, that you've got to do big, big things. You should have to be considered one of the best fighters ever in that weight class if you want to move up and fight for another title. Because then it just becomes a thing that's not so special. Like it should feel a massive thing when a lower weight champion's moving up and fighting. Imagine when does that happen in boxing? Like you never get these legendary fights in boxing, and if you do, it's like jumping up like by a weight of 2 pounds or something. In my opinion, we need to keep. These are the things that make the UFC special. Is before Conor McGregor did it, no one had ever done it. People had done two weight division champs, but they'd never done it at the same time. So, in my opinion, you need to keep it for special fighters. That's just how I think it has to go.
Do you not feel like though it's been special when it has happened? Because
Yeah,
it's
I
not going to
do.
happen very often.
But like, do you think it was like DC is yeah, it was. Yeah, actually, I can't say that because it was special when DC knocked out Stipe. I feel like every time it has been special so far, but it's only happened like 5 times.
And that's the thing. I think with this, it's not going to happen. It's going to happen a lot more, but it's not going to happen continuously.
But if say if Leon Edwards goes up, he beats Kobe Covenant, and that's two title defenses. Then you got about five contenders who are on win streaks waiting for a title shot in the welterweight division. That gets held up because that champion's moved up to fight in a different weight class. And also, you know, how like when a big fight's on, you get that butterfly feeling in your stomach. You know something crazy could happen. How excited would you be at watching Islam Makhachev after there's so many good fights at lightweight, moving up and fighting Leon, or Leon after there's so many people need to fight up and moving up and fighting Strickland? I feel like if you start putting fights like that on, which to be fair, I'm complaining about nothing that's happened yet. I'm just complaining about fighters wanting to go. Obviously, a fighter would want to go do it. In my opinion, it's no risk to move up and not put your belt on the line. You get massive recognition and credit for it, and you keep a belt even if you lose and keep that pay-per-view money. But I can see the sport heading in that direction, in my opinion.
So I do completely understand, and unfortunately, I can see it, which I think is a bad thing.
Hmm.
You said about seeing the sport go in that direction. The way the UFC is going to be making fights is going to be making fights people are going to want to see. And I
Yeah.
feel like on paper, everybody's, or the majority of people, are going to want to see fighters go up almost all the time.
Hmm.
On paper, that's always going to be the fight to make. On paper. and I do completely understand. With belts, I think that the way to counteract this would be if you do decide to go up a weight class, you have to have one title defense. Then when you go up, you have to have an interim,
Yeah,
and
but
that interim gets a title shot if you don't have a fight in between their interim gaining of it. So that way, there is somebody just as a placeholder. Because we look at John Jones, for example,
hmm,
and we look at fighters who aren't fighting as consistently as champions should be fighting. And if you're a champion, I know we talk about stuff like fight help and whatnot, but you should be fighting consistently.
yeah,
You should always be having a
definitely.
fight booked
At
in,
least four, yeah, in my opinion.
at least four.
Well, no, not at least, but four is what you should aim for.
Four is definitely what you should aim for. That's a fight every 3 months. We're seeing a potentially new champion every 4 months.
Mm,
I think by having that interim there, you have somebody who's almost there to have the guy who's just won the belt in the division above or the division below to almost kind of hurry him up a little bit,
yeah,
apply that
I
pressure.
agree.
And by doing that, you've always got somebody who's because if he wants to stay a champion in his top division and he doesn't want to be a double champ, then that's his decision.
Mm.
Then you've got an exciting division of potential champs. I think that's how you go about it personally.
Yeah, I do. I don't hate it. I'm not gonna lie, but I do think there's just enough inch and belts thrown around already. I do think you could kind of change it up and be, but I feel like there shouldn't be a rule set on. Because if I'm a fighter and I've got seven title defenses, I should be able to skip the queue and go and fight the champion. So that's where I feel like it gets a bit different, where a guy should, in my opinion, have way more than one title defense before moving up. And also, I like your idea, but why not just make it you have to make a quick turnaround from your title defense, and then you have to just go and fight the number one contender in the weight class above, and that's like not that long after you defend your title. You can't sit out for a year and then jump up like we see some people doing, and so you have to stay active. That's your choice if you want to do that. Have to beat the number one contender in that weight class above. But I don't think that's the way they should go with it. I feel like they should just, I honestly feel like they should just keep it as a rarer thing. I feel like that's just the best way to go.
So the way you're thinking about it is that you think they should do it so that
Only
you
legends get the
own
chance
only
to do it.
legends, and that's why you said five defenses. Because
Yeah,
after five defenses, you've defended your belt 5 times.
that's
You've
legendary
defended
shit.
yourself,
Yeah.
which because we're not seeing champions who are
Mm,
reigning for years on years and years, not too often anyway. I do understand your perspective. It's all a matter of whether you're opposed to seeing it happening
mm,
continuously or whether you're opposed to seeing the belt held up.
yeah.
Because both things could be negative. I think the belt being held up
It's
is the
terrible.
worst
I
thing,
hate that
and I
so
think
much.
I'm very baffled that as a company they allow
Yeah.
it for it to happen. Although at the same time, I suppose when you have the likes of your John Joneses holding a belt, that probably is better for your company
Yeah,
expansion.
definitely.
In
It's a
contrast
business,
to,
isn't it?
and it is a business which I think I don't know if that would necessarily impact it too much though. Like it would prevent, it would definitely stop, growth.
Mm.
Like in regard of that particular that particular stream of it. But I don't know. It's
I think
hard.
it would impact it in a sense where John Jones as a champion brings a lot more views to the sport than if you strip him and give Tom Aspinall the belt.
Well, yeah,
But
yeah.
Jamal Hill being champion doesn't bring more views in, so you're going to strip him and give Alex Pereira the belt. I mean, that's where we do have to sort of make the understanding that there is just a big difference between us being the fight fans. We just want to see the best fights and the best people fight each other, and there is a business. And we do sit here pretty much every week and have at least one complaint to make about something the UFC are doing, and we do need to understand that they're trying to do what's best for the UFC, but holding up belts just you just know by everyone's reaction that's the worst thing they can do, and I think that's just what this whole double champ thing is going to be doing is holding up divisions.
It makes it boring for
Yeah, it
certain
does.
fans, definitely
Yeah.
so, because the heavyweight division, if nobody's fighting for a championship ever,
Mm.
you're watching good fights, but there's no real speculation of who's the next champion
Yeah.
because we don't know if it happens, when it happens, where it happens. We just don't know.
Mm.
It's just something which, all right, well, we've got a champion here, but this champion's kind of just there.
Yeah,
It's
punch his way into it.
and everyone in the top five is brawling constantly and
Mm.
fighting, and yeah, it's worse, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, but I got that one off my chest really. I just there's a lot more things we will talk about because I'm sure we're gonna see some of these fighters get that shot of being double champ, and we'll go through if we agree with it or not after the time. I think it would be we do try and keep this UFC based because I think that's where all the entertainment is. But I think we should talk about PFL. Finally, it feels like this has been going on for like a couple of years now. Finally getting the Bellator deal done, buying Bellator. I'm pretty sure they get their whole roster, pretty much their whole roster of fighters with it. They've offered Scott Coker, the Bellator owner, the chance to stay on at PFL as well, and the matchmakers have all been offered jobs. So really, this is just one big powerhouse joining companies, and they're going to try rival the UFC. And I saw the PFL owner on Errol Houani's show. I'm pretty sure PFL are backed by the Saudis with their money, so they can put on any sort of fight they want. They're looking to get like people like Deontay Wilder and Garner, Jake Paul, all involved. And he's talking about Dana White didn't talk about the PFL 4 years ago, but now he can't stop talking about the PFL, and he's worried that PFL is sort of rivaling. What do you think the chances are of? Because this is a roster of some really good fighters now. What are the chances of them rivaling the UFC?
So I think the champion with the acquisition of Bellator, we look at what the best fighting companies have, well, best fighting organizations, and you're thinking to yourself, all right, well, UFC and one, UFC's number one, although one's also very good as well. I think one's different though.
Yeah.
They are all very different. One I see, and then you have Bellator,
Hmm.
and then like PFL's there as well. PFL has just kind of risen though very rapidly, like the growth of like you said, Dana White. When was he talking about PFL?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it does just really show how PFL has exploded as an organization. What PFL do their fighters, the way they're bringing in fighters,
Hmm.
and the fighters Bellator have, this is going to be, if it's combined in one way or another and it's kept kind of how it is, Bellator is a bit more similar to, well, it's definitely more similar to UFC than PFL is.
Yeah.
If it's kept stylistically in the way of Bellator, or if it's a matter of Bellator fighters fighting PFL, PFL fighters fighting Bellator, then this is going to be one of the most attractive
Hmm.
fighting organizations for fighters to try and become a part of.
Yeah.
Because the UFC isn't necessarily going to be the most attractive organization to become the world's best in Asia
Hmm.
and vice versa. And it's a really big market. I know that Bellator is quite big over here.
Yeah.
It's a very big in the UK. So this is definitely something which we're going to see fighters joining when fighters leave their contracts. For example, we saw Ben Askren and Demetrius Johnson and
Yeah.
all of that. When fighters are doing bits like that, I can definitely see the organization, whatever it's going to be,
Hmm.
whether it'll be the same two or whether it'll be something slightly different in the next 10 years,
Yeah.
potentially.
And it will be the long run because PFL, they don't mind playing the long game. Their whole their whole MMA organization is pretty much based off what we would see as a football or soccer league. Like they get points for winning, and it's such a strange sort of way they run it over there, and it is a very unique way. And now getting all the Bellator fighters on top of that could just add so many exciting fights because, I mean, I know you probably didn't catch it because I don't think many people watch the Bellator at the moment. That's kind of why it is where it is. But that the card last weekend was crazy. The main card, so many good fights. Rafael Stotts, who's big prospect, he was almost at joined the UFC, and I think his name's like Sabatino. They had their second fight, and the grappling exchanges and that. The Pitbull brother got walked down and dominated. AJ McGee fought. So there's just so many great fighters. Aaron Pico, who he's a state champion wrestler and a Golden Glove boxer, kind of 25 years old, made for MMA. So you've got fighters like this now that are going to go to the PFL, and PFL have some great fighters too. So yeah, I don't think it's going to rival the UFC because the UFC are kind of just they're a machine, aren't they? That worth billions and billions.
They, they,
So
they grow every single day,
yeah,
and it's something which is just so dominant at the moment.
mm,
It's the UFC is becoming as big as stuff like like rugby
yeah,
and
yeah,
like I want to say Premier League because that's like
yeah,
that's a level above. You know what I
yeah.
mean? But it's definitely becoming as big as these big sporting organizations all over the world.
Well, I mean, I don't want to talk about it today because I haven't done my research, but I have heard rumblings of some sort of court case being put against the UFC, and I heard someone, no one credible to my knowledge, but someone talked about how this could really damage them. But we've seen this try and happen multiple times. The UFC got the best lawyers. That comes with being a big business. So that if that doesn't impact them, that's one way I can see PFL and Bellator getting over of them. If sort of the UFC gets pushed back a lot in their sort of progression by something like that. But the likelihood of a massive business like this being affected by something outside of the actual fighting game, then it's probably unlikely. Let's be real.
With Bellator, are there fighters allowed to fight in other like have fights in
No,
other
but
organizations?
they're not. But now PFL let their fighters.
So and that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
This is going to be so exciting now to see these
yeah.
cross organization fights. The UFC is great, but at the same time, we have these fighters in other divisions who
Well,
are
like
the
chained up
best
the
in the world,
UFC
or
fighters.
but they can't fight UFC champions.
No,
Or we're saying that the UFC, there's not a fight in the UFC with a champion, which you don't want to see.
yeah.
So
But it also does make it interesting. PFL have this new sort of pay-per-view model they have. You know, they build a fighter and go chuck him against a Javonte Davis or a Ryan Garcia, one of these massive name boxers, and that's a way to or put him. They could maybe partnership with Ngannou on his next boxing match against Deontay Wilder, and that's just a way they're going to just pump their brand out, and they're always going to be looking to do that. And I feel like that's one way they can kind of be biting at Dana White's heels a little bit. Dana White's getting on. It'll be interesting to see where the UFC goes when he retires as president. Probably just saves, just repeat and recycle. But
maybe it'd be different. Maybe it'd
yeah,
be really different. Like all these things we talk about are just going to be changed.
yeah, I just hope not. All people like to complain, but I'm happy with the UFC right now. There's a few things I would change, but I'm if I wanted to watch a different organization, I would.
You can't knock the UFC. It's called the best fight in the world,
Yeah.
and it's done the best way. And there are things in which everybody wants to see slightly differently.
Mm.
You're never going to be 100% satisfied, but with the UFC, you're like 90%, 95%.
Yeah, yeah. And, like you can at least one, there's at least one fight a month that you're really looking forward to.
Oh, I'd definitely say there's
Yeah,
there's always
not
something on.
more than one if we're real about it.
Well, it's very rarely we see a fight night which we look at and think to ourselves, like, oh,
Yeah, they're usually behind a massive card. If they put a terrible fight night, it's usually behind a stacked card of the week before.
it's hard to get a terrible fight night as
Yeah, it
well.
is. There's just so many fighters on the roster now. There's so many exciting fights to put on, and that will keep the UFC going for years.
Like you got to think, if the UFC were to hold a card every single week, 52 weeks in a year, there are 52 fighters you want to watch.
Mm.
There are more than
We
52
could probably
fighters.
name 52 right now between us.
And you could put each one on a main card of a
Yeah,
fight night.
definitely. Yeah. Um, I think that's basically all the talking topics we've got to go over today. I did enjoy, I do enjoy talking about sort of other related things a bit more. I think that's what we will be looking to do that a bit more, just like the news going on. I do feel like we were doing news and we slowed down recently. I feel like they're waiting for a big Conor McGregor announcement that could be on the horizon. But we hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to rate us 5 stars on Spotify, share us around with your friends. That's how we'll grow. Subscribe to us on YouTube, and yeah, we hope you enjoyed.